On today's episode of the PCT podcast, we are joined by former professional footballer Ian Brightwell, who has a long and illustrious history in the game. Ian, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. Thank you for giving up some of your time during half-term week to have a chat with us. So, basically, for those that aren't aware, can you just give us a little insight into what you're up to now, and you know what you've had in the past before we delve a little bit deeper?
Yeah, well, I played my main football experience with Man City, and then went on to Coventry, Walsall, Stoke City briefly as on loan, Port Vale, and I finished up at Macclesfield Town. After that, I pursued, and I've still got a property business. So basically, there's a lot of rentals of houses. I've done some developing, only on a small scale. And football-wise, I'm working at Manchester City as a match day ambassador. So on match days, go in and speak to the punters in the hospitality areas. Obviously, that's not happening at the moment because of what's going on. But yeah, that's what I'm up to now.
Super. So it's still in the game a little bit, and an interesting career change. What we'll do today is we'll delve into a little bit deeper of that playing career, and obviously, if it's okay, we'll speak about your current interests in the academy system with young Bobby. But let's go back. Obviously, at the start of your playing career, you signed schoolboy forms at the age of 14 with Manchester City. So, what age did you start playing, and did you know about the interest from Manchester City?
Yeah, I probably started playing, as a kid and with my mates at about the age of 5 or 6. Okay. We're going back a few years now. I'm 52 years old now, so we're going back a few years, and the whole system was completely different than it is now. So I first got picked up or scouted for Man City. I was about the age of 11, and it was a coaching course over in Macclesfield. I'm a Congleton lad. I've been brought up in Congleton. So it was a local coaching, half-term coaching course. And I just got invited to go down to Man City and play in the school holidays. They'd have trials, because they used to have trials then. And you'd go down for the week, and they'd look after you. And then you just really play games. Yeah. And then it just progressed from there. Each half term, as long as you kept getting invited back, that means you were still there. But it wasn't like now. It wasn't. You weren't officially signed to a club, whether it's Man City or United or Rochdale or Port Vale, Stoke, whoever. That's how the system used to work. And then at the age of 14, clubs were used to be able to sign you as a schoolboy.
Right.
And what that meant was that you'd sign on schoolboy forms, and no other professional club could put you onto their books.
Okay.
So you could play for your, any other teams, your school teams or your local teams, but you could not sign for any other professional. So it was really the professional club, in which case it was Man City for me. They had your registration forms. So that was at the age of 14. But they did have, going from the age of 11, just stepping back again, they had, I suppose, like feeder teams. So we'd play in local leagues in and around, usually in and around Manchester. And you'd just play on a Sunday. We played in the team I played in had a lot of players that went on to play professional football, most of them at Man City. So at the time we had a good side. So they'd change each year. We'd win the league in that particular league, and then the league would chuck you out because you were, you'd win it by a mile.
Yeah.
But it was all leagues in and around Manchester leagues. I had a Saturday league or usually a Sunday league. So then 14, signed schoolboy, and then at 16 or 17 years of age, assigned as an apprentice, as it used to be called then. I think it's probably called a scholar now. You'll probably know better than me. I think they call it a scholarship. So I did that for 2 years, and I was signed as a professional at the age of 18. So that was my kind of build up and pathway into it, which is, it's a lot different nowadays. But in some ways, I think it was a little bit better because they were picking or getting the kids, a little bit older age. Everyone wants, every boy and lots of girls now, they want to be footballers.
Yeah.
And I just think when they're getting the kids at such a young age, some clubs are getting them at 6 and 7 years old. That's a little bit young, because there can be, there is a lot of disappointment on the way and a lot of rejection, and that's just the nature of the game. And a lot of kids are getting that at a young age, and it can put them off.
Yeah.
And then, parents, I'm probably the same. You want, and you're the same. I'm sure you want your kids to do the best they can in whatever it is. But with it in football, you'd love your kid to be a footballer, and I know I would. But I'm also pretty realistic, knowing that the likelihood is, it's pretty unlikely, because the dropout rate and the rejection rate is big. There's so much more opportunity now. I think there's more opportunity now than there was.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I want to touch on later on the episode, in terms of the difference between then and maybe now that you're seeing with your lad. But going back to your playing career, you were part of the FA Youth Cup winning team in 1986. Talk to us about that group of players you had and what it was like to go and win such a prestigious trophy at that time.
Yeah, well, at that period, we're going back into the, it's probably like late 1970s, early 80s. Manchester City had the best youth policy in the country, and a lot of clubs went on to copy it. Yeah. I know that Alex Ferguson, he did that. That was the first thing he did when he joined Manchester United. He made his youth policy a priority. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the likes of Beckham, Scholes, and Nevilles, Nicky Butt, all them boys came through. I was involved with City from the age of 11, so probably 1980. And then assigned, like I said before, I think it was 85 as a scholar or apprentice. But during that period, there was 7 lads that I kind of grown up with from the age of 11 that went on to play for Man City's first team, and then people moved on. So including that was myself, Paul Lake, David White, Andy Hinchcliffe, Steve Redmond, Paul Molden, striker, and lad Ian Scott. He played at City. He ended up playing at Stoke. He got an injury. But there was 7 of us, and we'd grown up, and we'd been in that group for probably 6 years previous to when we won the FA Youth Cup. So when we actually signed as apprentices at City, we'd probably been all playing together, and we knew each other's games inside out for 5 years before that. And it was the chief scout at the time was a guy called Ken Barnes. He played for Man City in the 1950s and won the FA Cup with them in 57. Team that Bert Troutman played in. It was a great City side. He was a chief scout, and then there was Tony Buck and Glyn Pardo, who played in the Man City teams of the late 60s, early 70s. And they'd won pretty much everything domestically. They won the European Cup, Winners' Cup. They were experienced guys and tough as well. Tough guys. It was a hard school. But you got your rewards out of them. They were not only good coaches, they were good men, and they worked well as a team. So that, I think, helped the players a lot. You kind of had Ken Barnes, he oversaw everything. He was getting the players in, and then Tony Buck and Glyn Pardo, they'd make you into team and then make you into players. And you know, looking back on it, everything was simplified with them. You know, you always got told, you know, do the basics right, and you've got a chance. You know, and you know, you control and play, control and that's all they used to say. Control and play, control and play, and it, you know, it gets instilled into you. And everything was 2, you know, 1, 2, or 3 touch. They'd get you to pass and move. That was the other one, pass and move, and you just remember bits that and tips that they came up with. The two, I say, Glyn and Tony, and they'd, you know, looking back on it, we thought they were like really old, but they were younger than me now at the time. But we were, you know, 16, 17, 18 years old, and Glyn would have been probably late 30s, maybe 40, and then Tony was a bit old. He was like nearly 50. But they join in the games, you know, the five-a-side games that we play, and they'd be the best players. And just because they did, you know, they were experienced and they were still relatively fit for their age. But everything they did was simplified. They didn't, you know, they didn't try to complicate the game. Yeah. And people always say, you know, football is a simple game. And, you know, you've been in coaching a long, long time now, so you'll know it is a simple game, and it can be frustrating when people try to do too much with the ball and try to complicate it. So I think the grounding that the youth team had, it couldn't have been better, because everybody knew the job, and it was simple. I mean, if you didn't do it right, you know, don't get me wrong, they'd let you know. You know, it was old school. We talk about old school. You know, they could tear a strip off you if they needed to, but you soon learned that if you did what you were asked to do, it wasn't a problem. And you worked hard, and I think the players that I mentioned there, I say we all went on and made careers in the game. I say there's the 5: myself, Steve Redmond, Paul Lake, David White, and Andy Hinchcliffe. We all played in the England under-21s in the same team.
Right. Wow.
Which, you know, to have 5 players in the same team was, I mean, it was great. And in that team, you know, there's people like from other clubs. Paul Nerson, he played it. Paul Ince, David Hurst, the striker at Sheffield Wednesday, Nigel Martin, goalkeeper. You know, there's a lot. Razor Ruddock. You know, there's a you know, some, you know, lads that went on to do big things in football, played in that particular England under-21 side. But to so really, as going back to the Manchester City youth team, we knew each other inside out. Yeah. And you know, we'd go and win games. They used to have it was called the Lancashire League, and the clubs used to have, you'd have the first team, your reserve team, and then it was called the A team, and that was kind of like the third team, which was really your youth team, and you'd play in that, and you'd play, you know, it's all in the northwest, so it was Liverpool, Everton, Man United, you know, and then the Rochdales and Berries, Boltons, those teams. So you're playing against lads of similar age, but then also mixed in that there'd be players coming back from injury, first team players. But also in that league, there was teams like over in Liverpool, like a team called Marine. You know, they were dockers from Liverpool, like men, grown men, because it was open age. You know, and they were proper, you know, hard men. Yeah. And you were put up and you had to play against that. You know, they weren't professional footballers, but they were good non-league footballers. Like I say, grown men. And when you're 17, 18, you think you're a man, but you're not. Certainly when it comes to football, yeah. You know, they teach you, you know, things that you probably shouldn't be taught. But it was tough. You know, I remember that team at Marine. They had their centre forward. His nickname was Killer. You know, it's Killer. They'd lump it up the pitch, and all you'd hear was Killer's ball, and then, you know, it was just like smash. But you had to deal with it, yeah. And you'd go there, and it'd always be. I mean, to be honest, we used to beat them, but it was so hard, and you had to learn quickly. And again, with going back to the youth team, we got a lot of experience through the better youth team players would play in the reserve teams, and playing in the reserve teams, there was first teamers, lads that were either not playing in the first team, or they were coming back from injury from the first team, and you're playing against people in the same situation. So again, you're learning against. You could be playing against international players, and you're 17, 16, 17 years old, and you're playing against internationals. I remember my first reserve team game, and we played at Anfield, because you used to play at the stadiums, the main stadiums. There was a little bit of a crowd. It wasn't a big crowd, but there was 300 or 400 people in. But you're playing at the main stadium, and we played Liverpool at Anfield. And Kenny Dalglish was player manager at Liverpool at that time, so he'd keep himself fit. So he was playing in the reserves. Jan Molby, a Danish international central midfield player, and Craig Johnson, a right winger. I mean, there was so much, and you're having to play against. They'd won everything in the game. Those type of players, and not only did you learn a lot football wise, you'd learn a lot, experience wise, little things that they'd do. So I remember playing against Jan Molby. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, won't remember, but if you Google him up and have a look at his career, he was a top class midfielder. But he was a big bloke. Yeah. And I was young and fit, and I couldn't get near him. And it took me years to work out. And all he would do, he would just, as soon as I wasn't looking, he'd just step back a yard, and that'd give him an extra yard, and that's all he needed. And then he'd just receive the ball, and he'd just ping it all over the pitch. And I couldn't work out, because I was so young and fit. I couldn't understand how I couldn't get near him, but that's all he was doing. I'd turn my head away like that, and he'd just step off me, receive the ball, out of his feet, bang, gone. It was all in one movement, and he never seemed to move out of the centre circle. I'm sure he did, but he didn't seem to move out of it. But he'd just run the play, he'd run the show, and then and you're playing against players like that, and say Dalglish, and it was the same for every other team you played, because it was called the Central League. That was basically everyone in the north. So you had Liverpool, Everton, Man United, City, and it'd go down sort of far as Birmingham, Aston Villa, and then up north to Newcastle, Middlesbrough. So you're playing against all, those teams that had top professional players who were playing in the reserve team. And again, you had to learn quickly. Yeah. And I think that's probably a big difference now, that you have to learn on the spot. You have to deal with it yourself, rather than getting. Yes, you would get told things, but it is more that you have to learn by experience and by playing against players like that.
It's something I've picked up on there, and it brings back to a conversation we had with Rory Delap, where he was saying at Carlisle he was playing against men at 16 and 17.
Yeah.
Experience. Just something I picked up on there is that, you mentioned the control and play and the experience of playing against men. Are we as coaches in this modern day trend, where we have so much available to us, moving away from the basics and almost doing too much for the players, not allowing them to make their own decisions and learn from that?
I would say that, yeah. I mean, if I was coaching now, I would try and there's a fine line between doing how it used to be done and today's methods, because I mean, the everything about coaching has moved on, but with football, again, we keep saying it is a simple game, and I think sometimes there can be, if anything, I think there's too much information now going from coaches to, certainly not so much as the players get older, But I think at the young age, I mean, you struggle to, I don't know how old your kids are, but you struggle to keep their attention for 5 minutes, you know, and I think if you give them too much, it makes them think too much and they switch off.
Something else you mentioned that before, Ian, was that when you came through with Man City, it was mainly games. Now, this is just my opinion. Have we moved too far away from letting the game be the teacher and almost becoming robotic and giving too much information, as you say? Because, you know, you mentioned there you've gone on to have a successful career by mainly playing games, and I get there was some coaching in there, but have we moved too far away from the game?
I think, yeah, to be honest, I think it has, yeah. But you do need some type of structure in it. You know, more coaching, actual coaching, hands-on stuff than we got. But you have to learn by your mistakes and keep everything simple. I say all our training sessions, I'm not sure, and in fact, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty certain, like people like Rory Delap, who you've interviewed before, I mean, all our stuff was 1, 2 or 3 touch maximum. Yeah. You know, so you're getting the ball and passing it, control and play. And it was only really in the last third that they'd say, you know, go and express yourself, go and beat a player if it's on to do it. And it was more if they'd go absolutely, you know, they'd go, you know, fly off the handle. If you didn't play a simple pass, if you tried to do something silly with it, you know, they'd just go ballistic, absolutely ballistic. You know, just play the simple pass if it was on to do. Not so much in the last third because you've got to try things there. And again, simple things like don't play across. You know, don't play square balls. You know, always play balls on an angle. And you think about it, you think, well, yeah. I mean, if you keep the ball moving on angles and run at angles, you're not going to go far wrong, because if the ball gets cut out and it's a square pass, you're in trouble. So yeah, I think certainly the younger ages, let them play. Yeah. Ken Barnes, I mentioned, he was the scout at chief scout at Man City, played the game, massive amount of experience. He said, just go and play. When we used to go in the holidays for training as kids, that's all they say, just go out and play. And then they'd assess you and they'd kind of work out what your best position was. I mean, at school I was a centre forward, right. But because you'd score loads of goals. But as a professional football, there was no way I wasn't good enough to be a centre forward. I wasn't that type of player. So they kind of work out, they take the good bits out of you and say, right, well, all his good bits, he'll be I started off, I've actually played every outfield position in the first team. Oh, okay. But really, in the youth team, they played me at centre half, and then they moved me into central midfield. So I was a central midfield. I was very fit, so I could get up and down the pitch. So they put me in central midfield, and then different managers come and they played at right back a lot, right back, left back, and then I played a lot at centre half when 3 at the back came in, or came back in, probably in the early 90s. Brian Horton, one of the managers, he liked to play 3 at the back, so I'd play as one of the 3 at the back. So as my career went on, I became a more defensive player, but in my early career in the first team, I was more of a midfielder, like getting forward and getting back, like up and down. So, but like I say, they just they thought that I could. Again, they didn't have big squads back in the day, and I was actually able to play in a lot of positions. So that that suited the club, and it suited me. I was playing most weeks. In hindsight, people always say, "Well, did you think that hindered your career?" And I didn't think that, and I don't think that because I played a lot of games. But I suppose if I was in one specific position, that might have, people would have said, right, well, he's a right back, or that is his position, or he's a central midfielder. Someone like I know nowadays, if you said, I don't know, Vincent Kompany, you'd say, oh yeah, he's a centre half. Yeah. Or he said, thinking the player like David, I'm talking Man City players like David Silva. He's a midfielder. He's an outer, but or Messi. He's a forward. Ronaldo. Whereas they used to call it a utility player, which I don't regret that. I think, and I think with players now, let them play and then see where suits them best as well.
I know we've deviated from sort of the question sets at the minute, but I think there's some really good detail on this for any players that are listening. You mentioned there that at first team level, you played pretty much every outfield position. And as you mentioned, some would think that hindered you. Surely, as a young player coming through now, rather than pigeonholing yourself into a position, if you were able to do several jobs for your team or several positions, would that not add more value than hindrance?
I think it would, yeah. At the younger age, yeah, definitely, because you learn how to play in different positions. So if you're, for instance, if I'm a centre half, I'm playing centre half, and then the coach said to me, even in training, go and play at centre forward. You then know or you should know as a centre half. You think, right, well, if I'm a centre forward now, what would I do to get away from the centre half? Yeah. And so it kind of, I think it should, if anyone takes it on board, I think, right, I know how a centre half plays, but I'm now a centre forward, so I need to try and get away from the centre half. And the same in any opposite position. But really, the basis of the game is still the same, whether you're a centre forward or a centre half. If you're a centre forward, you receive the ball, pass it off, control it, and move somewhere else. Yeah. And it's the same for a centre half or a central midfielder. And you look, I think if young players watching today, it is a different game now. It's a lot more, the pitches allow it. It's a lot more technical. There's a lot more build-up play. But in general play, if you I think the best way to watch it, if you're watching a game on telly, turn the sound off and just watch the players. And just when they receive the ball, they'll rarely take more than 3 touches unless they're in a tight situation. And the ball is always moving. You watch the top teams, the Man Cities, the Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, the top teams, top players, and the ball is always moving. And the only way to do, and it's moving quickly as well. When they're playing well, that ball is moving quickly, and the players are moving quickly as well. They'll pass it, they'll make a different position, they'll make a different angle. I think, and I was the same. You like to, when you're watching a game of football, you like to go and watch Messi and Ronaldo and players like that, because they can beat 10 players and they make it look easy, which it isn't, and like to score those type of goals. But I think for 99.9% of footballers cannot, or more than that, cannot do what Messi and Ronaldo do, but they can move the ball quickly. Professional football, they'll move the ball quickly, and they'll make a different position, and they'll make runs, whether it's a decoy run or a run to receive the ball. And I say, if younger players watching this your podcast now, just turn the sound off on the telly and watch how the ball moves, and it's bang bang, and it's always moving quickly. The top teams are the best at it. That's why the top teams, and it's very rarely that they'll go and try and beat 3, 4 players. They'll move it by passing and movement.
And again, I think I wanted to carry that conversation on because there's some real gems that have come out of that in terms of sort of development through the game. Going back to your career, you were given your debut against Wimbledon. Talk to us about how you felt going into that game. Obviously, you've been with Man City for a few years now. What did it feel like stepping onto that pitch on your debut?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So we'd won the FA Youth Cup in the May. Mm-hmm. We'd beaten Man United in the final. It was over 2 legs. It was 1-1 at Old Trafford. And then they came to Main Road and we beat them 2-0. So to win that, and there was, we'd all, as the youth team, we've been together a long time. And at that time, there was Steve Redmond, who was the captain of the youth team, centre half, Scouser, good player. He came to, we were talking about it a minute ago, he came to the club as a centre forward. He was the highest, he used to have Merseyside schools. He was the highest goal scorer for Merseyside schools. And I think it's only just recently that Wayne Rooney beat his record. So he was outstanding centre forward. But the club, they made him a centre half. They turned him into a centre half. And he was, because they didn't believe he was quite good enough to be a centre forward. But they played him at centre half. And he really could play. He was a good footballer. But yeah, so Steve had already played in the first team. And out of the youth team, going to the Wimbledon game, I was the second one out of that team to play in the first team, and we played Wimbledon, first game of the season in the 86-87 season. And Wimbledon, again, I don't know if you remember, but they had the team called the Crazy Gang. People like Billy Jones, and a lot of your viewers and listeners won't remember them, but they were a good side. Vinnie Jones, Dennis Wise, Laurie Sanchez, Dave Besant in goal. They had some really good players, internationals as well. But they were hard, tough, real tough men. They didn't call them the Crazy Gang for nothing. So they came and they made progress. They'd started in the old 4th division. So they got promotion every year for 3 years, and they ended up in the 1st division, or as we call it, the Premier League as it now. So they got 4 or 3 consecutive promotions. So that's what type of side they were. So we knew we were in for a battle. I was a Man City supporter. So to play for the team that you supported was incredible. We came out at the old ground, Main Road, and there the home fans usually stand behind, at most stadiums, behind the goal, but Man City's you came out of the tunnel, it was the opposite, so it was the side, they had a big terraced stand, and it was called the Kippax stand. So of course that was where when you ran out onto the pitch, that's where you'd go and give it the clap. So for me to run out in front of Man City fans and run over to the Kippax, it was a big thing. Yeah. In terms of, I was nervous, but Billy McNeil, the manager at the time, he's passed away just recently, but he was brilliant for me as a player. He played for Celtic in the 1960s. He was the first Celtic were the first British team to lift the European Cup, and he was the captain of that side. And he played 800 games at Glasgow Celtic, won everything up there. He was a Celtic manager for years. He came down to City, and he gave me my opportunity time as a professional, and he gave me my first team debut. But I always remember he said to me, the week before, like on the Monday before the Saturday game, he said, you're playing on Saturday. He said, go out there. He said, don't worry about how you play. He said, just go and play. Just do what you can do. He said, but you'll play however you play, you're in for the next 4 or 5 games. So in other words, go out. There's no pressure on you. Mm-hmm. Just do what I know you can do. So from a confidence point of view and a man management point of view, it is brilliant. Yeah. You look back at it now, and he's had the confidence to tell me on the Monday. He said, right, you're going to be playing, but don't worry about it. You know, however you play, you'll still be in for the next 3, 4, 5 games. You know, because I trust you. So I thought that was and certainly, again, you look back at it in hindsight, it's a brilliant piece of man management. Yeah. Which was a big thing. I mean, it's a big thing now, I know, but I think certainly in football teams, as managers, you need to manage the players. Probably more so now. But yeah, so that gave me the confidence. Went out on the day. We won 3-1. I did get substituted, but because I was tired, you know, because I was everything, you know, the adrenaline, I was obviously trying to make an impression. But we won the game 3-1, and it was a great day. And then on the I think it's in the bank holiday Monday, we played sort of 3 or 4 days later. We played Liverpool at Anfield, and Liverpool had just won that previous season. They'd won the double, which was like the league and FA Cup, which, you know, it's unusual now, but back then it was really unusual. So they had people like Bruce Grobbelaar in goals, Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrenson, Jan Mulby, Steve Nicol, Dalglish was player manager, Ian Rush up front, had Paul Walsh, Craig Johnson. It was a brilliant team. It was the best team that I played against in my career, and I played against the Man United teams in the sort of early going up to the mid-90s, when Man United were, you know, they had a bloody good side, yeah. But that Liverpool side that season, they were unbelievable. That was my second game, so I walked out in front of a full house at Anfield, you know, and the Kop, because everyone knew about the Kop. And it was, and you're getting tingles, even though it was at Liverpool. You know, the noise was immense. It was, I'd say, for my second game, I was 18 years old, only just 18. And they absolutely battered us. And I don't think we had a shot on target. But half time, we went in 0-0. And then the second half, they were shooting towards the Kop end. So, and you can imagine what that was like. It was in the crossbar, it was in the post, the keeper was saving it. You know, we were putting last-ditch challenges in, and we came off and we drew the game 0-0. And to this day, I never know how we drew 0-0. They were different class as a team. And I'm sure if they did the stats like they do now, they must have had 80% possession. Must have done. They must have had 25 shots on target, and we just got absolutely battered. But we got a 0-0 draw. We had Mick McCarthy. He's a manager now. Mick is. A lot of viewers might know him. You know, he's a good, solid centre half. So Mick was at centre half with a lad called Kenny Clements and Steve Redmond, and we come off, and Billy McNeil, and I won't say exactly what he said, but he said, he put his hands up. He says, well done, lads. How the hell have we managed to do that? He said, fantastic. And that was it, because he knew. Yeah. But we were played off the park, but we managed to get a draw out of that. And that was my second game. And then third game, I remember the third one now. You're bringing back memories now, Martin.
Good.
We played Tottenham at White Hart Lane. Wow. And I was told to man-mark Glenn Hoddle. Glenn Hoddle, he was he never played for England as much as he should have done, but he was an England international. But what a player he was! He was ahead of his time. Glenn Hoddle was. I was told to man-mark him, and that was an experience. Again, couldn't get near him. He wasn't a runner, Glenn, but he was a player, and he could do anything with the ball. You know, he was doing tricks that, you know, at that time, you know, people weren't doing tricks like he was doing then, and he'd get it. He was spraying the ball here, there, and everywhere. And another experience that you know, for my career. So my first 3 games, they were really big games, and I learned a lot from all of those games, because you're playing against great players and experienced men. That's the other thing. You'd be playing against men.
I say you could ultimately say it was a real baptism of fire. In your first 3 games, you've experienced what some may not experience in a career, let alone your first 3 games as a pro.
Yeah, it certainly was a quick learning curve, and you did have to learn quickly, or you'd get destroyed on the pitch because you'd be playing against world-class players. And there is that difference between, you know, top players and world-class players. And, you know, that people like Glenn Hoddle, he was world-class. Ian Rush, Jan Mulby, they were world-class players. And then you've got the class above them, which they're very, compare nowadays, the Messis and Ronaldos. I mean, they're just literally stratospheric, yeah. But yeah, the world-class players, they'll destroy you. They're just so, you can't really, just mentally, it's probably more mentally aware of what's going on around them and what they're going to do next and how they're going to do it, and the quality on the ball. You know, they never give the ball away. Say that Liverpool side we played against, that was just, it was pass, and that was when the pitches weren't as good as they are today. You know, they were. You look back on the videos now, and the pitches were mud baths, and it was a different type of game because it had to be. Yeah. You know, you did have to go back to front a lot because the pitches weren't good enough to do it. But Liverpool, they did try, you know, almost all the time to play it on the floor, no matter what the conditions were. And you couldn't get, when they were on form, you couldn't get near them. They were, good side, incredible.
So we mentioned there, obviously, a baptism of fire in your first season as a pro, but unfortunately, ultimately ended with relegation with the club. How much of effect did that possibly have on you as a player, so young, and then almost as the club? Can it have a long-lasting effect?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't that much of a surprise that we went down. That's not me mean to say we went down on purpose, because the club were in a transition. Say by that time, in that season there was 7 lads from that youth team, young lads that played in the first team, and in one game all 7 of us played. So you imagine 7 18-year-olds playing in, call it the Premier League now. You know, it's a tough ask. Yeah. I mean, that wasn't every week. That was, but there was usually, 4 or 5 of us playing week in, week out, and then you had to mix that in with the experienced lads, people like Mick McCarthy, who was great, and all the older lads, the experienced lads, they'd help us. They were brilliant. A lad called Neil McNabb, central midfielder. Mark Lillis, he was a forward. Some lad Clive Wilson played at left back. He went on to play for Chelsea and Tottenham. Andy May. There's some names that people might not remember, but they were good pros, and they helped the young lads. But really, we should have been playing. They should have been, and the club weren't able to do it at the time because they were financially struggling. They could do, maybe 2 or 3 of the young lads playing, and then put more experience around them. A bit like Man United did and Ferguson did when the Nevilles and the Scholes, he was able to bring them in, and the Beckhams, bring them in slowly. And the Giggses, Ryan Giggs, I didn't mention him, he's another one, Lee Sharp. They were able to come in, and he could pull them in and out of the team. And he had some top international players playing at United at the time. And that's why I think they were so successful. And then in time, those 5 or 6 young Man United lads, they were the core of the team for many years. And I think that's one reason why they were so successful, because they had, not only were top class players, they knew each other's games inside out, and they'd been transitioned into the first team rather than been thrown in, and the club was still successful. So yeah, it was in terms of players that played, think I've lost my track a bit there. What was your
so, yeah, it was just how much can a relegation have an effect within the player and also the club?
Yeah, so really, probably 4 games from the end of the season, we kind of, we were struggling. So we went down. There was a change of manager. Mel Machin came in. He came from Norwich. He was able to buy a few players in, but his brief was from the chairman at the time, and who was Peter Swales. Listen, we've got this core of young lads. That's what he's working with. So you've got to bring in players to work around them. We're in the second division as it is, or the championship as it is now. And then that allowed us to, it wasn't as, the league wasn't, you're playing against teams that aren't as good as in the first division at the time. So that allowed us to play as a team. So it did help us. And then we got promotion. We ended up getting promotion. It was actually in the second season we got promotion. But by that time we were, we gelled. We were sort of 20, 21 years old. So we all the 5 young lads, we got, 100 odd games under a belt by then. So you really class as experienced players. Going back to any lads that transition into the first team, again, Tony Buck and Glimpardo and Ken Barnes, those guys, they used to say, he says, you haven't played, he says, we're not classing you as a first team player until you've played 10 consecutive first team games. Okay. He said, right, well, okay, so if you play 1, 2, 3 or 4 games on the trot, he said that, that's good, don't get us wrong. He said, but I'm not going to class you unless you played 10 games on the trot, because that shows, you're playing consistently well and you're able to cope with it. And I'd say that's still true today. I think today it's a lot, certainly in the top league, it's harder for players to get into the first team because the financial constraints aren't there, and at most clubs. But I do think it can be successful. I know Man City, they're getting players here and there, but I don't think you'll ever see, I know from my day at City, I don't think you'll ever see 5, 6, 7 players from the youth team progress into the first team. And then Man United a bit later on, they have the same thing. They had a lot of players come through. I don't think we'll see that in time to come, because clubs, they want the success instantly. Yeah. And you're not going to get that by throwing that amount of young players in. So from going back to your question again, from a confidence point of view, it going down, it did and it didn't, because we sort of knew we were going down anyway. But when we got promotion, that was where we thought, well, hang on, we can do all right here. We've sort of proved that we can compete and we can play together. And then we got promotion back into the first division. And it from then on, it got, with a couple of changes of managers, that Mel Machin got, when we got promotion back into the first division, Mel Machin got the sack sort of October time, and Howard Kendall came in, and Howard, he changed things around. And from then on, we thought, hang on, we could actually do something, in the league. We're not going to be fighting relegation. We're not going to be fighting in battles like that. We're going to be, top half, top 10 team, which at time proved that we were.
Say that in such a short space of time, so early on in your career, you've gone from experience in Anfield, walking out in front of your home team's crowd, Glen Hoddle, a relegation, and then a promotion. Not long after that was your first international cap. How did that feel to go and represent your country? And again, did it feel a bit surreal having experienced all this at such a young age?
Yeah, to represent your country at anything is, I think, the pinnacle. Whatever level, to represent your country is the biggest thing you can achieve. Because I played in the England under-19s as well, and that was an unbelievable trip. That was. They took us to on a tour to Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina.
Wow.
And I'd have been 18, 19, and the 5 City youth team lads went out. And again, there was Paul Ince. Paul Ince, Paul Merson, Razor Ruddock. You know, they had some Kevin Pressman. He was the goalkeeper at Sheffield Wednesday. He was a goalkeeper. And the 2 coaches that took us out there, the manager and coach, was Bobby Robson, or Sir Bobby Robson, and Don Howe, who was his assistant. So Bobby Robson, they were the England manager and the managing coaching team at the time, and they wanted to go and have a look at the players. So they took us out there. You know, so that you're getting coached by basically the England management team. So that was at under-19 level. We played against Brazil in Uruguay. A different type of game, you know, playing against Brazilian lads. And the pitches back then, they weren't as good. And certainly in Brazil, you know, the grass, it was like a thick, I don't know how you describe it. It wasn't like the grass over here. Yeah. But they could do anything of it. And they weren't scared to try things. They would, you know, they'd be shooting from all sorts of angles and getting them on target. Oh. And the hotel that we were staying at, it was on the Copacabana beachfront. So, and you'd watch during the day and the evening, there'd be anything from kids to blokes, and they'd all be playing football on the beach, playing keepy-uppies. You know, you'd have blokes, and they'd have kids playing, and they'd be standing in a circle, just keeping the ball up between them. And they'd keep it up, honestly. Like, you'd watch them, you know, like half an hour, and they wouldn't drop it in half an hour. You think, you know, and in that group, so there'd be men, there'd be, you know, 6, 7-year-old kids, you know, 15-year-old kids, and that's all they do. They just play football. So you could see how the Brazilian mentality was, certainly back then. I mean, I don't know if it's changed now, but they were just, you know, because the beachfront is, you know, relatively, I suppose, rich, but then 2 or 3 blocks behind, you're into the, you know, it's almost like shanty towns. Yeah. So all the, you know, that was, you know, there was a lot of poverty. I mean, we were told not to go back 2 blocks, he said, because you might not come back. It was, you know, it's pretty scary stuff. So we didn't. But it was just really, it's, you know, poor kids, and they were just coming and playing football, and that was their life, and that they just wanted to be footballers. And I think, I think for kids watching, you've got to practice, whether it's just keeping the ball up, and certainly over there at that time, that was all the kids had. Yeah, you know, to go and play football, and they would. You'd see them playing matches on the beach. I know beach football's quite a big thing now, but back then it wasn't. But the things they were doing with the ball on the beach then was incredible. And Bobby Robson said to us, he said, right, we'll go and have a match on the, you know, between us. We'll go and do some training. We'll do it on the beach, and we'll do it. And I don't know if you've ever played on a beach on soft sand, but it's hard. You know, it's not only hard work, but to control the ball and to pass it. And they were making it look like it was on grass. Yeah. And we were, well, to be honest, we were hopeless at it. But that was the skill level that they'd learn, and they learn it. So I can see why Brazil were always so successful. And then going on to the under-21 team, progressed into the under-21 team. And to represent your country at anything's, I think the pinnacle. Unfortunately, I didn't go on to, play for the England first team, if you want to call it that. But I was close. I played. We used to. They used to take us to Bisham Abbey. That was like the training camp. There was Lithershall and Bisham Abbey. So before you went to play the game, you'd go and train there. And it was in 1990, and the first team were training, and we were we were going out to Poland, and it was a qualifying in Poland. So we trained on it'd been the Monday morning, then we flew out over to to Poland after the training, but they were short. I think it was Mel Sterling who was the England right back at the time. He was injured, and Bobby Robson and the left winger, I can't remember who the left winger was at the time, it was it might have been Chrissy Waddle. I think he was he had a knock, so but he wanted to play in 11v11. Bobby Robson did, so he needed a right back and a left winger. So they sent me over as a right back, and Lee Sharp as a to play in 11v11 against the it was an in-house game, so it was so he played with all the England internationals, first team internationals at the time, like Gascoigne and Peter Beardsley, and Brian Robson was there, John Barnes, Terry Butcher, Tony Adams, some big names. And yeah, so joined in that game, and I played in it, and we did like 20 minutes each way, because it was just he was doing some shape and some workout, and it was the kind of the easiest, it was the best game that I'd ever played in, or thought, because I was getting overlapping, getting me crosses in, doing all sorts. But it was just, I felt it was so easy from a playing point of view, because every time I got the ball, you had 2 or 3 players like, give me the ball, bang, and it was just easy, because you always had so many options, because you were all top international players. And so I'd get the ball, you'd get the ball like Chris Woods, he'd throw it out, the goalkeeper, I'd get it, and then before you knew it, you had 3 or 4, you had players closing you down, but you had 3, 4, 5 options, where to pass to, because the players that you were playing with knew exactly where to be, and it was easy to play in. You think it'd be harder, but it was easier because you had more options. Because if you're playing not so good team, it's harder because you might only get one option.
Yeah.
We were always told, you need at least 3 options. So when you've got the ball, at least 3. So if you're playing it right back, your centre half should be asking to receive it. If you've got something like a right winger, he should be showing. Then you've got a midfielder, and then also you've got your 2. If they've got a 2 up front, you've got your front men. They should be showing as well, or making a run, or so really you're looking 3, 4, 5 options, of which 3 should definitely be on to play. And you only get that when you're playing with better players, because they all know what they're meant to be doing. And I say it does look easy on the telly, doesn't it, when you're watching the top teams? But yeah, again, going to kids, it's as important when you've got the ball and when you haven't got the ball, as it is when you have got the ball. You've got to make space for yourself. You've got to show for the ball, be willing to receive it. And if everyone does that in clockwork and in sync, it just becomes a natural thing. And then before you know it, you've got all these options. And never be afraid to receive the ball as a kid, or any player. Never be afraid to receive it, but always bear in mind, what you want to do with it next. Or have an idea of what you want to do with it next. But yeah, don't be, and if you make a mistake, don't be shy of, don't go hiding. Go and try and rectify your mistake. Number 1, number 2, go and try and the same thing again. Don't be scared to receive the ball just because you've made a mistake, because everyone makes mistakes.
I mean, for me, I'm sat here as a football fan, and you're reeling off names like Gascoigne, and some of the players that you've had the privilege of playing with. Do you ever sit back and look back on those experiences at the time and think, "Wow," for a start, and I'm just trying to find the words for it, really, of how good was it to be involved, and as I say, having those early experiences that probably weren't a positive, with the relegation.
Yeah.
Were they moments that drove you on and inspired you to go and be better?
Yeah, I think definitely the knockdowns inspire you to go and do better and improve on it. And again, if you like, to your listeners and your watchers, just be confident and go and try things. And if you get, your bad experience should actually help you. I mean, I've seen a lot of footballers who actually probably ones that didn't make it where they probably could, because they didn't get a bad experience. They didn't get, you used to get some kids that were really big at school, and they had it all their own way at football because physically they were bigger.
Yeah.
This is only one example, but they were physically bigger and stronger, so they'd always come out with the ball, and they were always probably faster. But as time goes on and people catch you up, like physically, you'd notice that the kids that were really big at a young age, because they'd never been knocked off the ball before, because they were physically bigger, they start to get knocked off the ball, and they start to. And I have experienced this with players, and all of a sudden they're thinking, well, hang on, he can't knock me off the ball, I'm biggest and strongest here, but they don't, because people catch up, and because they've never had the experience of being knocked off the ball, as that example, all of a sudden they are getting knocked off the ball, and they've got two choices. They've got, right, well, I'm not going to let that happen again, or they're just going to go into the shell thinking, well, we can't do that. And that's the two types of people, or in just football, it's anything. If you get a knockdown, you've got two choices. You either try and deal with it, however you deal with it, or you go into your shell. And if you come out and say, right, well, I'm not going to be beaten, or by this or by that, if you can come out and do that, you've got a great chance in anything. So never be, I suppose never be afraid to like get up and say, right, well, I'm going to beat this. You've got to, don't go into the shell, whether it's talking to people or dealing with it physically. In football terms, go and deal with it. Now, if you need to speak to people about it or ask people about it, you go and do that. Yeah. But never be frightened of doing it, and keeping things back. And I think that works certainly in football, whether it be on the physical side or the mental side. It's it's tough, isn't it? It's a tough world. But if you can beat it, don't be afraid to go and beat it and to better yourself.
It leads me nicely on to sort of the next question. There is that we've just been speaking about playing an 11v11 game and having Gascoigne, Beardsley, people like that offering options. Not long after that, you were sidelined for over 12 months with a knee injury. How frustrating was that? And can you just talk to us around sort of the process for professional footballers recovering from long-term injury? What psychological issues might you face upon return, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I was actually, Peter Reid was manager, and we'd had a successful, it's probably best part of my career, or the best I was playing, and we'd finished fifth, ninth, fifth, seventh in the Premier League, or First Division going into the Premier League, and I was playing right back, and I'd had a knock on my knee for a while, and it turned out it was tendinitis, patella tendinitis. But again, it was different back then. I think if it had happened now, they would have pulled me out and treated it early on.
Yeah.
Whereas back then it was like, go and play on it. Do you feel all right? And I did. I felt all right. I felt I could play on it, and I did. And as time went on, it just got weaker and weaker, and it was an inflamed patella tendinitis, and in the end, it gave up. It snapped. I just jumped up in the air and went pop. So it was. It wasn't nice, and it turned. They operated on it. They said, right, yeah, we can sort it out. And then I was actually back for I did that in I think it was the January but I was then back playing. Oh, sorry, we had pre-season in the July time, so I was back training. But I knew it wasn't right. Something wasn't right with it. So I ended up. I had to go back and have more surgery. So I had more surgery, and then by the time I got back playing again, it was in the February 19. I think it was 94. By the time I got back playing again, 93, 94. But it was a long process, and at one stage I did think it was more so just before my second operation, because the surgeon said to me, he said, listen, the operation that I'm going to do to you is, I said, I haven't actually ever done it. He said, but, you know, I know all about it. He said, because it's such unusual what I've got to do to you. He said, but what he'd done, he'd gone to America, and he'd got it was all books, and there was no internet or anything. He'd done all his research, and he'd gone to America, and a few American footballers had a similar injury, and it was the complications after the injury more than the actual injury. He said, so this is what I'm going to do. He told me exactly what he was going to do. He said he couldn't guarantee anything. He said, but he said, I am confident that you'll be able to play again. I said, but I can't guarantee it. And they can't, because nobody can they? So that was the only time I had any doubt, thinking, well, hang on, if it doesn't work, what am I going to do after football? But as soon as he'd operated, I came out of surgery, and I was in a leg brace for 2 weeks, and then it was, you know, then another type of leg brace for probably another month after that, until I could get the range of movement back. But as soon as I'd got to the stage, I'd strengthened my leg, my quads up, and, you know, my leg muscles. I was doing a lot of swimming, you know, the rehab work, eventually cycling and rowing when the knee range was back together. But I could, as soon as I started running again, I think you just know, I thought, this is going to be all right. I could tell, because before I went in for the second surgery, it wasn't. I knew it wasn't right when I was just running, but this time I come out, and so I felt more confident. And then I played a few games in the A team, like as it was called then. It was like the third team, then into the reserves. And Brian Horton was the manager, and he put me into a game we played at Oldham away. Oldham were in the first division back then, it was the Premier League then. They were in the Premier League then, and we played Oldham, and I played pretty much to the end of that season, from February right the way through to the end of the season. But I did have doubts just before the second surgery. And I've always been confident in myself and what I can do and what I can't do. But I think mentally, you've got to have the mindset of, you know, you're going to come out and play after it, or do whatever you're going to do after it. I think if you can get that into your head, and like the rehab wasn't like it is now. I mean, it's looking back on it, it's pretty basic. You know, you're doing a lot of stuff going off, and they tell you what to do, but you go and do it on your own. And they trust you to go and do it on your own. Whereas now they oversee everything. You know, certainly in the Premier League and the top Championship clubs, they've got all the facilities for the rehab. But back then it was pretty much, you know, get on with it yourself. But this is what I want you to do. But I came out of it on the right side, which was good. But it was. Mentally, it was tough, because you don't really know if you're going to be playing again, or if you're going to be as good as a player. But that's where I think the people around you, that's where they come in. You know, I've got, you know, family. You know, they were, you know, they would encourage me, and you know, the coaches around there at the time, it was more so. Again, Tony Buck, he was still there at City at the time, and even Ken Barnes, they were encouraging me, say, yeah, no, they were just positive people. I think you've got a lot of positive people around you, and my parents and family, they were all positive. So I don't know if you know, my parents, they were both Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
So they'd had experience of that. My dad was the captain of the British Olympic team, and he got a silver in the 400 metres. He was the European record holder at 400 metres, European champion. So captain of the British Olympic team in 1964. Got a silver in the 4x400. He was the anchor man. And my mum, who was Anne Packer at the time, because she hadn't married my dad at the time, they were engaged, but she got a silver in the 400 metres, and then she got a gold medal in the 800 metres. Oh. So, and it was a world record at the time. So, they were positive people in their own right anyway, but they, transferred that onto me and says, because they'd had injuries in their career, because they'd been sporting. Again, it was all amateur back then, but it was the same. They retired. Dad retired after the Olympics. He was only 24, 25. My mum was 22. But I mean, nowadays, they'd certainly, Dad would probably done another Olympics. He'd done the previous Olympics, so he'd have probably done another one, and my mum probably done another two. But it wasn't then. It was like they had jobs, and mum started, or they started the family, and that was it. But they were positive people, really positive people, and that, was brushed off on me, and they made me believe that I could do. So I think people around you, and you don't have to be, Olympic athletes, or just be positive. If people can be positive, and that rubs off on other people, and it works the opposite way. If you've got negative people around you, that unfortunately can rub off as well. So try and surround you with people that are positive.
I was going to add slightly just before you mentioned it, is how important is your support network in not just football, but in life and any sport, really.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most important aspects of your life. And if you've got a good, call it support network, people around you that will be positive, try and surround yourself with people that are positive. And if you're a positive person, and a negative person, or people that's always half empty type of thing, try and get them out of it. It works both ways. If you're a positive person, go and, and if you do know someone that's a little bit negative, try and turn them around. Try and get them to see the positive sides of life and sport and whatever else it is. So that's a huge thing. And for yourself, I know you're a positive coach. I know Bobby's worked with it, and I know the parents that have worked with it, and that was one of the biggest. Not only a good coach, Martin. I'm not just saying this, but it's true. It was obviously your coaching ability, but it was the fact that you were positive and you gave the lads confidence. And I know the parents that I speak to, because a lot of them, or most of them, are still there from last year. They're exactly the same, and it's a big compliment to you, because everyone says the same thing, and that your positive aspect, that rubs off on the players, and I think it helps them, and it especially at the especially kids, because they're still learning, and that
best, don't they?
They do, yeah. They just they want to be encouraged, but on the other side, they need to be told when they're doing something wrong. They do need to be told that. It's no use saying you've done really well and you haven't, because that doesn't do anyone any good. But there's ways of, and I think that's what you did as a coach, certainly with Bobby. If you did something wrong, you'd say it in a way where he knew it was wrong, but you weren't destroying him and making him, feel that he couldn't go and try things on the football pitch.
That's appreciated.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it is. It's a massive part, isn't it? And say if you do know negative people, try and get them and turn them around. It works both ways, but it's a vital part of life, having a good support network.
No, I couldn't agree more with what's going on in our current climate. I'm very conscious. I've still got a few questions to go, and I could chat all day. But one for me is something that you don't see too often in the modern game. Is after an 18-year association with Manchester City, nearly 400 appearances, 19 goals. I'd say a pretty successful career, wouldn't you? What would you say the secrets of success were to such a long career with one club?
I think I was never I don't know, I suppose playing style. I just try and keep everything simple and try to do the right things. I wasn't a dribbler with the ball, but I could control it. I could pass it. I had a good movement. Later on I was more of a defender, and I think consistency. I think that's probably some players, there'll be a 10 out of 10. 1 week, and next week the 2 out of 10. Next week the 4 out of 10. Next week the 9 out of 10. And there's no consistency. And I think with we talk about the time that I spent at City. I think probably looking back on it, I don't know this, but probably because I was consistent and the managers could, I suppose, rely on. They knew what they were getting.
Yeah.
They knew what they were getting, and they knew they get it consistently. And that's what I tried to work on and tried to do everything right. Like I say, I wasn't, and I was never going to be a dribbler on the ball, so I wouldn't even bother trying it. If I needed to beat a player, I'd usually try to, play do a 1-2,
yeah.
Something like that. And you look at someone like David Beckham. He never used to dribble around players. He played 1-2s, and I mean he was a quality player, but really play to your strengths. Work on your weaknesses. I say going from my experience at City, just be consistent and try and do everything right, and don't be frightened of making mistakes. Because I had 12, 13 managers at Man City during my 12, 13 years as a professional.
Yeah.
So I think, again, looking back on it, you think, well, that must have been all right, because each manager has a different opinion. So if I've got 12, 13 managers that thought, I was okay and they were willing to play me, and I suppose that's a compliment. But really, I think, try be consistent, and try and do the right thing at the right time. So I think that's what happened at City.
Consistency, we say, is key, and I think it's great advice for not just players listening, but coaches alike. After Man City, a short spell under Gordon Strachan at Coventry, having gone from playing regularly to not featuring so much, how hard can that be for a player? And also, team with that, how important is it for a player to know what they're signing up to when joining a club?
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, it was a good move. I didn't want Joe Roy. Man City had gone down to League 1. They were in the Championship, just about to go to League 1. I was out of contract. Joe Royle was manager. He needed to get rid of players. I was out of contract. There was a lad, Georgie Kincladsey.
Oh, yeah. And
they a Georgian international top player. They got rid of him. Uwe Rossler, the German centre forward. We were sort of all coming, so we were kind of easy to get, to move out, because Joe Royle had 52 professionals at the time. It was because each manager, because they had a lot of managers, they bought players and then they couldn't, because City were paying decent money at the time, and they signed them on 3-4 year contracts, and they couldn't get rid of them. So all of a sudden you've got 50 players, and most of them he didn't want, or he needed to get the budget down, or the wage bill down. So we went, and at the time it was for Coventry to go to Coventry. Coventry was still in the Premiership. Yeah. They had people like Gary McAllister, Dion Dublin, Darren Huckabee. They're a decent Premiership side. So it was a good career move for me, getting back into the Premiership, working with Gordon Strachan, top coach. So I went there, and I got injured early on. I had an Achilles injury. So it took me a while to get back fit, and by the time I got fit, it just didn't. I played one game for them, and it wasn't really working out. And I spoke with the manager, and he said, I think we need to move on, which I agreed with because I needed to be playing, and I need to get myself fit again. And I had an opportunity to go to America, which I nearly took up, but Walsall came in and they wanted a right back on loan. I was playing right back at the time, and they wanted to sign me on loan, and I signed there at Walsall, and they ended up signing me full time. So I canned America, but it was difficult at Coventry. So I got injured, got myself fit again, and it was it was difficult because I was a regular first teamer for 12 years nearly previous to that. So when you're not playing and you're playing in the reserves, and I was 30 at the time, 31, and you want to be playing at that stage of your career, and I wasn't getting the games. So it was quite a tough time. But then Walsall came along and they ended up signing me, and I had a couple of seasons there, and I was playing. I'd gone from pretty much 18 months, 2 years at Coventry with hardly playing with the injury, and then my first full season at Walsall, I played 56 games. I played in every game and every cup game, and because they were a bit worried at Walsall whether or not I was going to be fit. Yeah. And I was as well. Whether could. But I ended up. I played 56 games in which is a lot of games. In a season, and I was 30. Well, I was probably 31, 32 at that time. But yeah, when you're not playing, when you're used to playing, it's tough. But again, we go back to the support network. I had a good support network of family, friends, and eventually got back playing again. Yeah. And it was relatively successful at Walsall, who were in league. They were in the Championship, but they went down, and then we got promotion through the playoffs in the next season. So that was I'd played all those years at City. I'd never played at at Wembley or anything like that. And then we played at the playoff final. We played Walsall played Reading, who were actually the favourites to go up through the playoffs, and we beat them. But it was it don't matter. But it was at the Millennium Stadium. Yeah. So that was a good experience. I say, so you're going from Coventry where you're not really playing, and then all of a sudden you're playing week in, week out, and then go and win a trophy, if you like, with Walsall, who you probably wouldn't expect to win a trophy with. Yeah. But it was a brilliant experience. There was some good old pros there. Ray Graydon was the manager. He mixed up there was 5 or 6 older pros, and he mixed them with young kids or youngish lads, local lads as well that had come through the ranks, and it worked really well. So yeah, that was it. I started feeling more positive then, and that I could keep on playing for a few years, because I did have at one stage I thought should have just retire. So I was probably 31, 32. That was at Coventry. I say the American opportunity came up, and I was sort of umming and ahhing whether to go, and then Walsall played, and as soon as I was playing and you're playing in front of a crowd again, I thought, yeah, hang on, I want a bit more of this, and got back playing again, and yeah, it was. I had a good couple of years at Walsall. It totally revived my career and how I felt about football.
It's interesting that you mentioned there that, as I say, there's that psychological element of, do you want to be on the sidelines still? And again, that move sparked an upturn in your career. You then moved to Stoke, my team. For those that listen will know that, and a successful season again, promotion in a playoff final victory against Brentford. Must be quite a difference from not playing at Coventry and then going almost 2 back-to-back promotions via playoffs.
Yeah, it was because at Walsall they had a new manager, Colin Lee, had come in, and he was looking. It was near the end of the season, and he said, "Listen, I'm looking for younger players." You know, he was dead honest. He said, "So if you can get yourself a club," he said, "we'll help you find a club. You know, we'll try and get you away before the transfer." It was the March. It used to be March, the transfer window. So we'll try and get you away. So I said, "Okay, fair enough." You know, and I respected him for that. You know, it's not nice to be told that you're not wanted at a club. He said he wanted younger players, which is fine. But he told me, he said, "You know, this is, you know, there's nothing worse." And luckily, I haven't really experienced it. But you see players, and they don't know, or professional players, and they don't know where they stand. You know, does he want me? Does the manager want me? Don't he want me? But he said, "Listen, you know, this is what, you know, you're not part of my plans, basically," which is, you know, it's fine. And John Rudge was the director of football at Stoke, and John had tried to sign me when he was at Port Vale, when I was out of contract at Man City. I ended up going to Coventry, but John had tried to sign me then when Vale were back they were in the Championship. They had a good side then. So John contacted me, and Gudjon Thordarson, the Icelandic, was manager, and I had a chat with them, and they were, you know, again, both dead positive people. Were going for the playoffs. They'd missed it the previous season because Walsall had beaten Stoke in the semi-final the previous season, which they played in, and they were desperate to obviously get back up into the Championship. They wanted some experience within the side at that time. And I signed on loan with myself, Tony Dinning, and Dion Burton, the centre forward, and the lad John Miles as well, a young lad from Liverpool. He'd signed. So I played 4 or 5 games for Stoke, but I was, you know, part of the squad, and he wanted the experience in and around the squad, which I knew exactly what he wanted, and he was good. Gudjon Thordarson and Dave Kevin was his coach, his number 2, and they were brilliant. You know, they kept me involved, and it was a good set of lads. They had a good side. Youngish lads, but they wanted just a bit of experience to push them on. Got to I remember the semi-final down at Cardiff. It was, well, I'm sure you remember it. James O'Connor scored down at Cardiff, you know, and got us the victory down there. I mean, that was a brilliant night because I was sub that night, but was down in the bottom corner, and they didn't allow the Stoke fans in because there'd been a bit of trouble before with the Cardiff fans. So we standing, and a few Stoke supporters they had actually got in. So the shaking their heads, thinking, "Oh, you know, they're gutted." Like we were gutted because think we're going to go, and then we got the free kick, and James O'Connor took it, and it went in. It was like last gasp. Yeah,
that's down.
And it was a brilliant. Yeah, it was a brilliant ending to the night, and then went and played Brentford in the final, and I'm sure Stoke, and I can't remember if it was the north or south dressing room, but Stoke were one was apparently cursed that no team had ever won a final being in the south dressing room, and Stoke got the south dressing room, so there's a kind of a bit of a voodoo on it. But Gudjon Thordarson, he did a brilliant pre-match team talk.
Okay.
Gudjon did. It was, you know, he sat us all down. You know, it was probably 5 minutes, but everything about it was positive. You know, I can't remember the exact words and the exact script, but it was. He made everyone feel as though he made everyone feel positive. He's like, you know, you've come this far. You're good players. You know, you've got a chance to go and progress yourselves, progress your career. You know, progress Stoke. You know, Stoke. You know, if we win today, and it was just, it's probably the best pre-match team talk I've had, or that I've been involved in. It was inspirational, and Stoke won it. They won 2-0, I was sub, but I came on for the last 10, 15 minutes. Came on for Tony Dinning. We're 2-0 up. He just wanted to shore things up, and he put me on in the middle of midfield and go and do that job. And it was So it was a great experience, and I'd say he had a good team. Gudgeon did. He had good coaching staff, Dave Kevin with him, and some good young players. And so I was hoping that I'd get signed. So on the Monday or Tuesday, we had a meeting at the Britannia, as it was called then, and he sat us down. He got myself, Tony Dinning, and Dion Burton, who were all the lads on loan. He said, "Listen," he said, "you've done absolutely brilliant for me. I'm going to sort you out contracts. I'm going to sign you." So that was fantastic. And then about a week, 10 days later, got a phone call from John Rudge. Rudge's phoned. He said, "Listen, Ian," he said, it's a little bit awkward this. He said, "but I've got to tell you, we can't offer you a contract because Gudgeon's been sacked." They sacked Thordarson and bought what's his name, Cottrell from
Steve Cottrell.
Steve Cottrell, yeah, Steve Cottrell. He bought Steve Cottrell, and of course he just wanted his own players in, which again was fine. But I was gutted because it was I wanted to play for Stoke. Because I live in Congleton. I've lived in Congleton pretty much all my life, and it's not far from Stoke. I'm a Man City supporter, but there's a lot of with it being so close to Stoke. There's a lot of Stoke City supporters round here. Certainly at that, or there is now, but at that time it was in Congleton. It was either Liverpool, Man United, or Stoke, and a few Port Vale. So there's a big. So it's good for me. It's close to home. I wasn't going to have to move. I was probably 33, 34 years old at the time. I thought, right, great. And then, I got the phone call from Rudgy, and he said, "Listen, really sorry, we can't offer you a contract." So, it was disappointing, but I enjoyed my 3-4 months at the club. It was good because it's a good club, big, call it a big club, great support. It's an intimidating place if you're playing against Stoke. But I had, it was good. It was a great experience to go and play there. And then within, I know that was at the end. So pre-season, there's a lad called Brett Angel, centre forward. He played at Everton, Stockport, Everton, and I played with him at Walsall, Brett. And Brett had gone on. He was training pre-season with Port Vale, and he recommended me to Port Vale. It was Mark Grew was the coach, and Brian Horton was the manager. And I kind of knew their chief scout, Ray Williams. I said, "Listen, any chance it could come down and have a look at me if I can come down?" And so they got me down pre-season, and I ended up getting a contract. Brian gave me a contract because I'd worked with them at City, at Man City. So he knew what I was, but I did all pre-season when I played in the games. He thought I did well for him. So I did a year at Vale and as a player, and then he took me on as a player coach the season after.
Was there a time there, Ian, where you thought, I want to make a step in from playing to coaching?
You know what? To be honest, no, there wasn't. I wasn't thinking ever of going into coaches. I took me coaching badges, or my UEFA B, as it was called. I don't know if it's still called UEFA B. When it was the end of the season where Stoke had got the promotion, so I'd gone to Keele University and done it there, and then I was doing getting all my hours in, coaching hours. So I'd got it as kind of a backup, but I wasn't really 100% sure I wanted to go into it. And then I'd done my first season at Port Vale with Brian, and then he got me at the end of the season, said, "Listen, I'm not going to offer you a contract next season." And I was 34, coming up 35 at the time, and that's when I thought, right, well, maybe it's time to hang my boots up now. And so I've gone home, had a bit of a think, and then blown me. It was about 2 days later. I got a phone call from Brian Broughton again. He said, "Listen, I've been thinking about it." He said, "Do you fancy being a player coach and coming back and just play when we need you type of thing? Come and train and coach." Because Brian was very hands on. He wasn't a manager that would say he'd leave everything to the coach. Brian liked to do a lot of coaching himself, so he was very hands on in that respect. And Mark Crew had gone. So he said that, I could do with some help, but, you can still play as and when anyway. So I said, yeah. I thought, well, if you don't try it, you don't know, do you? And I did it, and I really enjoyed it. I was working with the first team, and being a coach rather than a manager, you kind of, and I'm sure anyway, you kind of go between the players, so you hear a lot of things from the players that you don't repeat to the manager, whether it's, because if you're not playing, the players are having a go at the manager. The manager's, he's this and he's that. And I'd never go and, if they slagged the manager off, I'd never go and tell Brian. I'd never, ever do that, because I'd only just finished him playing. So I thought, well, if I was in that position, if I was a player and the coach went and told the manager what I'd said, if it was negative, I wouldn't be happy. So, and I think the players knew that, and so I got that sort of trust between the players and also from the manager, because he knew how it worked. He knew that players would be slagging him off to other players that weren't playing. So it worked well. And Brian, we were in the Vale were in the playoffs, and it was clear that the hierarchy at Port Vale at the time, they didn't want Brian as manager, so they were trying to get him out. And in the end, he left and he went to Macclesfield, and that's when Martin Foyle took over. Martin took over. But that, going back to how did I find the coach? Now, I had no real intention of doing it, but when I got into it, I really enjoyed it. Working with the players, setting up the sessions, doing the sessions, and you get a lot of. Again, you're more coaching than me now, because I didn't stay in it that long. But it's satisfying when you see things that you've worked on the training pitch that they come off, and that players respond to you. If you ask them to do something, they'll do it. And it can work the other way, where you're telling players to do things and it's like banging your head against a brick wall. But yeah, I loved it. And then when Martin took over, Martin Foyle, he asked me to stay on, which I did till the end of that season, probably another 3-4 months, or probably 3 months till the end of that season. But Brian had moved to Macclesfield Town, and Brian asked me to go and work with him. So I went back to work with Brian again. But Martin Foyle, Dean Glover, they were, when they took over, they were great with me, because they could have been completely the opposite. They could have said, well, he's Brian's, he's Brian's mate, he's, Brian's coach, we'll just get rid of him. But he didn't. They were really good. They kept me on, and worked really well with them. And it was Martin and Dean Glover was his assistant. So yeah, and I carried on coaching went on to Macclesfield Town and coached again, player coach. I was playing half a dozen games a season, which suited me, because I was getting, I was well over 35 then. And Brian was there 3 years, and then he got the sack. Then I took over as caretaker at Macclesfield, and I did 3 or 4 games, but that was always going to be temporary anyway, because Paul Ince knew Paul, or they told me actually that Paul Ince was coming in. And then again, I wasn't sure if I knew Paul Ince. I didn't know him well, because we've been on England under-19s and under-21s tours together, but I hadn't seen him for many, and played against him a lot. So I wasn't sure if he was going to keep me on, but Ince kept me on as part of his coaching team, and he then we did the rest of that season. Macclesfield survived in the league at that time, and then he went on to MK Dons signed him, and he went on to there because it's a bigger club. They had a lot of money, big budget there, and Macclesfield asked me to play. If I'd be the manager, and I took it on. Again, I never had any intention of. The last thing that I thought I'd do would be a professional football manager, because I didn't have that. I'd loved the coaching. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved it. But management's a totally different game. So I did. I won't go into the details of it, but it was hard. I was working. There was a lot of constraints, if you like, at Macclesfield, and they made it difficult. But you have to work with what you've got. And I did. What would it be? Probably 6 months as manager, and then we were sort of bottom. We were bottom 6 at the time. So anyway, I got the sack, and and I kind of. It was one of them. I knew as soon as I got the sack. Then I wasn't one of the. Some people want to go on and continue being a football manager, which is great if you've got that ambition and drive to do that. I didn't have any ambition or even motivation to do it, because it's totally different than coaching at a club, because you're having to deal with things that you shouldn't have to. I suppose you shouldn't have to deal with, really, but you are, and you've got to be a manager, or certainly a good manager. You've got to be a different breed and a different personality. And I'm not that type of personality. I am driven. Don't get me wrong, but you've got to be thick-skinned. I think that's probably the easiest way. If you want to be a football manager, you've got to be thick-skinned and not give a damn about anything that anyone says, because you're going to get abused whether you're doing well or you're not doing well. And that isn't really in my nature. Coaching, because you're not getting it. Because as a football manager, you're always wrong, because you've got, depending on what where you're playing, you can have 50,000 people and they're disagreeing with your team selection, or if you might have 1,000 people and they're all disagreeing with your team selection, or why didn't you put him on us, or why did you bring him off? And everyone's a armchair football manager, and if I think the best football managers are people that they're just bang, that's what I'm doing. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not going to listen to them. It's just exactly what I think, and I'm I suppose a little bit more sensitive to what people say. Yeah. But that's just me as a person. But football managers are very unique. Yeah. I don't think managers in many other professions have to deal with what football managers do. The average, I don't know what the average lifespan used to be. An average lifespan of a professional footballer, this is average, is 18 months. And that was back when, if we're working out an average, Arsene Wenger and Alex Ferguson were still managing it at that time, and they probably had 50 years between them. So that brings the average up. Yeah. So I think, and I didn't, luckily I had other things in my life as well. Yeah. I had other interests outside of football. So I had business interests. I had properties that I bought when I was playing. And I got them sort of when I was at Man City. Yeah. So I did have other interests outside of football. So that did help. But I'm not trying to discourage people from progressing, because football is the best career you can have, and the most enjoyable. And if I'm speaking to you now, if you want it, Martin, which I know you do, go for it. Really go for it and give it everything you've got, because the rewards can be incredible. And if you enjoy it, that's the main thing. Whatever job you do, if you enjoy it, which I know you do, go, and the world is your oyster. World is your oyster.
Ian, you've worked under some big names: Howard Kendall, Peter Reid, Brian Horton, Bobby Robson. You had the joy of. Is there any one manager that sticks out in the memory? And if so,
I always say there's obviously Billy McNeil, because he signed me on my first pro contract and he gave me confidence and he made me believe. But I always say three, and it was Howard Kendall, Peter Reid, and Brian Horton. Those three for me were the best, and probably the most, in terms of position in the league, most successful. With Howard Kendall, he bought different. Howard Kendall and Peter Reid were very similar. They were both brilliant man managers. There wasn't a lot of tactics talked and strategy. It was more, they obviously give you a system to go and play in, but it was more about the team ethic and working as a team. And they'd get players in that knew how to play. They'd buy players that could play, and then they would give the opportunity to young lads if they believed that they could progress. So those two were a brilliant man manager, and then Brian Horton, he was again different character to Peter. He was a decent man manager, but he liked to play good open attacking football. Brian was very honest. If you had a bad game, he'd tell you. If you had a good game, he'd tell you. I remember we played at Arsenal. It was first game of the season down at Highbury, and he didn't put me on at the start, and we lost again. I think we lost 2-0, but he put me on at half time, and we were 2-0. We were like 2-0 down after 10 minutes. It's like, and they absolutely battered us. And anyway, Brian put me on at half time, and we did better second half. And he got me in on the Monday morning, and he actually apologised in his kind of way. He said, "Listen, I should have played you I played you from the start." He said, "I won't make that mistake again." And I thought, well, we didn't need to say that. And he did. I played for the rest of pretty much. I was a regular for the rest of the season, because he made his team selection, and I won't say who it was, but he put the player in, and the player that he put in, they were coming to their end of the career. They weren't really bothered. I think he realised that, and he wanted players that had gone play for him and had the heart in it and wanted to go and give everything. But he said that to me, so again that gave me confidence to go and play for him. And but he played some good football. Brian did. Played with two wingers. It was either go 4-4-2, or he did play this. I'd say it was more of a, I don't know what it'd be, like a 3-3-5 at times. Have two wingers, sometimes 3-4. It was like an incredible system that he played. Peter Beagrie, remember?
Yeah.
Peter, left winger, he played at Stoke, Everton, came to City. Nick Summerby was the right winger, and then he had a choice of, like his three front men. He had Niall Quinn, Irish international, Paul Walsh. He played at Liverpool, Tottenham. He had played for England. He's a bit, he's in his early 30s at the time, but still a top player. And Uwe Rosler, German international, or East German international, because it was still East Germany then. So he'd have those five attacking players, and it was great to play. And there was Gary Flitcroft, central midfielder, went off to Blackburn. He central midfield with Stevie Lomas. Again, he signed at Irish international. He went on to play at West Ham. So it was good, and they were sort of old school attacking, up and down central midfielders. So yeah, it was good times with Brian. But yeah, those three managers, Kendall, Peter Reid, Brian Horton, and Alan Ball was good. He got a lot of stick. He was great with me. A lot of people slag him off, but I'd never slag Alan off, because he was really good with me. He unfortunately for Alan, he signed a brilliant player in Georgie Kincladze, the Georgian international. He was, probably the best player with the ball at his feet that I've ever played, certainly played with. But he couldn't find a position for him, because off the ball he'd do nothing. But he couldn't really find a position where you could just leave him to his own devices. And I think that was his downfall at Man City, Alan. But yeah, the Kendall, Reid and Horton for me.
Just before we sort of head off and finish the episode with our quick fire question rounds, a couple of questions now. You've got a lad coming through the academy system, as we mentioned there. How much has it changed from when you came through to your lad coming through? And just really, how hard is it to separate yourself as a parent and an ex-player?
Yeah, it's difficult. I know we touched on it before. I think players get scouted too early. I was at training last night watching Bobby. Bobby's under 13 now. But on the pitch behind us, there was kids that, they were 6 and 7 years old training. And I think that's too young because there's you get a lot of disappointment and there's a lot of expectation more so from the parents, thinking that their kid's going to be the next best thing since sliced bread. And unfortunately, that isn't the way. So that's certainly changed. I do think they've taken too early. But I remember when before Bobby, he was at Stoke's Academy the season before last. But before that, he'd been asked by a few clubs to go down, and I thought he was too young. And I think I made the right decision in not letting him go at a young age. But I was lucky to, I've seen kind of how football works and how it is and how it can take parents time and effort and energy, and also the kids as well. And the kids can lose a lot at young age, just playing with the mates. I think that's a massive part. And Bobby was 10 or 11 when he signed at Stoke, and I thought at that time he was about right mentally, to be able to deal with any disappointments. Looking from, I think a lot of parents, they have too much expectations, thinking that the kid signed at a professional football club. They think that they're going to be, playing in the first team, the next week and that, and it isn't the case. On the positive side of that, the kids are getting coached. They are getting some coach, certainly better coaching that I got, because I didn't get any until really I was probably 14, and even then it wasn't that much. You kind of learnt yourself, and you just played the way you played. Certainly from a ball work and that type of stuff, it is better. That's a positive. Another negative, we touched on it before. I think there's too much information for the kids at a younger age where they don't need it. Just go and let them play and let them find the feet. Give them the basics. But yeah, again, Bobby, he did get a disappointment at Stoke, which I think was a good. They released him after a year. I thought he'd done enough to stay on, but they didn't, which is fine. That's the way football is. But again, I understood that, and I was able to say to him, listen, just because Stoke have released you doesn't mean to say another club won't take you on. So he was disappointed, but he got on with it. And Port Vale had shown an interest season before, so I'd spoken to Lee Foyle, and he said, yeah, bring him down. And luckily, you were Bobby's coach, and that gave him confidence, even from when his trial, because he did the trial, and he had confidence from his coach. And he'd had a disappointment at Stoke, but then he's come back, and then you as his coach, you've made him feel feel positive, be positive about going playing and going enjoying himself, and he did, and that rubbed off on the rest of the team. And that's an important part of the coaching methods, is to make the kids understand what they've got to do right and wrong, give them the confidence to go and play and to go and express themselves. And so with Bob, and as a parent, like for me, having played, I probably get frustrated. I don't talk to him too much about it, because I think if I start saying stuff, he'll feel pressure from me
Okay.
To I really say to him, I don't get me wrong, I'll say what he could do better and what he can work on, but generally don't really talk in too much depth about it. I say, listen to your coaches, which is important. To listen to your coaches, because they're the people that are looking at you. They're the people that are asking you to do what they want you to do on the football pitch. So they've that's a massive part of a young kid's growing up and experience. From my point of view, I will say to Bobby, just really things like keep it simple. But I won't go into any detail about it. I'll tell him what I mean, but I kind of let him get on with it and learn. And I think if you find with kids, if your kids are anything like mine and any other people's kids, I said something to him the other day. It was about throwing, actually. I said, well, try if you receive them from throwing. I won't go into it because it'll be boring. But when you're receiving a throwing, just try this, because when I used to take a throw in, there was a player he was a central midfield player, and he used to do it, and he used to get out of trouble every single time, and you'd think you could predict it, but you couldn't. He did the same thing. I'll tell you what he did. I was right back. I'd throw it into the midfield player, and he'd feign to kick it down the line, but he'd just open his body out and just let it run across his body and go out the other way. And he worked every single time. And I knew it was Tom Bennett, the lad. And I knew what Tom wanted me to do when I was throwing it into midfield on the square. And it worked. And I mentioned it to Bobby about 3 or 4 days ago, and just mentioned it to him and didn't say it. And I watched him in training last night, and he did it twice in training, and it worked. So I had mentioned it, but I didn't think he'd taken it on board, but he had. So I think as a coach and parents, if you do say something to kids, I think they do remember it, and they will try it, even though they've made out that they're not interested. Yeah. So and as as a former player, I don't say too much about the games, because everyone's got their own opinions. If anyone asks me a question of what I think, I'll tell them. But I don't think it does people any good, because you listen to some parents and Alex Ferguson all of a sudden, and they're wanting the kids to be the main thing for the kids, or my Bobby, that I want to see him do. I want to see him enjoying his football. I want to see him learning about football, which he has done and he does do. And also the good thing about the structure of the coaching now, it gives them a discipline. Some kids might not get that discipline at home or at school, or have that support network that we've talked about. But going into a football club, whether it be a professional academy or another type of young team, they can learn discipline and structure and respect. That's I certainly know from the academies that you've been involved in. I'm sure you do it, or I know you'll do it. Your other things. The main thing, if you have respect for other people, that doesn't mean you're on the pitch. You don't have to be nice to them on the pitch. You've got to go and compete, yes. But you've got to respect people off the pitch. It's just basic. I know basic manners, but that's not to say you don't on the pitch. You go out and you try and win. You go and win, but you've got to have some type of structure in your life. And I think the academies nowadays and football clubs, they do teach that. But going back to when I was growing up, because now they have a lot of grassroots football, don't they?
Yeah.
They didn't really have. It was mainly schools football back when I was growing up as a kid. Whereas now they've got a lot more structured football clubs at grassroots level. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's good. That's improved. There are things that could change, I believe, in that. But I think sometimes in grassroots football, when they get to a certain age, the better players know who the better players are, and they're playing with players that aren't so good, and the better players won't pass to the the not so good players because they know that player won't receive it. So I think there'd be better instruction it as they get probably to after the age of probably 9, where you have, I call it a first team and a second team. Call it what you want. Where you have the better players playing one team and the not so good players in the other, and the same for the opposition as well. Because I think players will learn more playing with players of their own standard, as in talking at grassroots level here, and they'll progress. They'll be able to progress more, because there's nothing worse for a kid that isn't that good, and they play in a grassroots game and they never get a kick of a ball. They might not see a kick of ball in 80 minutes or whatever it is. Whereas if they play in a team of similar ability, they will, and they'll enjoy it as much more as well. But I think that's probably from the age of 9 onwards at grassroots level. But that's just my opinion, and that's because everything. I know things. It's got to be inclusive. You've got to include everyone, and you've got to make room for everyone. And you don't want it to be. You want it to be competitive, but you don't want it where the coach is to win at all costs. You don't want that either. So it's a fine line, but so as a parent, I try to sort of keep my nose out, and if asked, I'll give an opinion. As for what Bobby thinks, my son, I don't know what he thinks. He just takes the mickey out of me, saying, I've never been a player and all that. So, but who am I to argue that? So, but it's good. He'll do what he'll do. If he's good enough, he's good enough. If he isn't, that's fine. As long as he's enjoying it. And like anything, if you want something badly enough, he can. He's got an opportunity now. He's got an opportunity. A lot of kids don't get the opportunity, but he's got an opportunity, and you've got to grasp the opportunity and just do the best you can. And if it doesn't work out, it don't work out. It isn't, and it won't be through lack of trying. And that's really the thing. And unfortunately, the majority of kids aren't going to make it as a professional footballer. But that doesn't mean that they can't go and try it and try the best and use the experience in other things in life, whatever job they go into. And if they do make it, it's the best job in the world.
So we're not just coaching footballers, we're coaching people who are going to go out into the world and become coaches.
Exactly, yeah.
So we have to make that positive. Ian, it's 2 hours, but it's felt like 5 minutes, if I'm honest. It's been brilliant speaking. We always finish off with a quick fire question round, just to put you on the spot a little bit and make it a little bit awkward. But what's your best moment in football to date?
Probably winning making me first team debut at Man City, club that I supported previously, so still do. So making me first team debut. I was never lucky enough to win a major trophy at City, but we won the FA Youth Cup. That was a big moment in my life. I'm talking domestically at City, so that was a huge moment. Of games, we beat Man United 5-1, which was a brilliant result. So that was a highlight in terms of the different games that I've played in. Playing in the or representing my country at under 19 and under 21 level. So I think those are me real highlights. And then of course, I've got a few playoff victories, but I think mainly is when I was young and I was playing for the club that I supported, and I was there for 12 years, so I couldn't ask for anything more really.
What's the biggest wow moment you've had in football? Something that's really taken you back and gone?
As a biggest wow moment, you got me. Playing at some of the big stadiums. I mentioned Anfield early on there. I mean, don't get me wrong, my first team debut at City was incredible. But when we played Liverpool, because I'd heard, you always hear the story of the Anfield. It's back when the Kop was standing as well. Most of it was standing, but you know, it's a big stadium. You know, it's still, excuse me, 50,000 in the stadium or whatever it was, and to walk out and then see all those people in the Cop end with all the flags out and that. And then, I know it isn't Man City, but you know, you just read about these stories about Anfield, and it is what they say it is. So, from a non-Man City point of view, I think walking out at Anfield.
Best friend in football.
It's actually played. You know, former player.
Yeah, former player, could be coach. Who's the one that you probably keep in contact with most?
Probably contact most would be Paul Lake. Paul Lake, the former City player. He was unfortunately his career got. Again, most of you listeners won't have maybe not heard of Paul, but he was as a kid. He played in the same youth team as him. He was in England under 21 international. He was captain of Man City. Howard Kendall made him captain at the age of 21. And he got injured. He got a bad cruciate knee injury, and he was played for England B team. Bobby Robson was going to take him to the 1990 World Cup. You know, as a kid, yeah. So I think that if Paul had been fortunate enough not to have this injury, he'd have certainly played for City for many years. Certainly played for England for many years, and probably captained England. You know, at that period. So I think, but I do keep in contact a lot with Paul, because we grew up together. We've known each other football wise since, you know, the age of 10, 11 years old. So I'd say Paul Lake. It's funny because, and I'm sure Rory said the same. You see that many players throughout your careers. They say ships in the water. You know, ships in the water. You might not see them for 10, 15 years. Having said that, when you do see him, it's like, you know, no time has passed.
Similar to my past in the army, you know, I go years without seeing someone, but as soon as we see him, it's like we've never been apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Who's been your toughest opponent as a player?
I would say the best players I've been lucky to play against some brilliant players. You know, Paul Gascoigne. You know, players like Glenn Hoddle, mentioned them earlier. You know, the list could go on and on, but I think the two toughest opponents were, and they were both Man United players of all bloody teams, was Brian Robson, you know, England captain during the 80s and 90s. He as a footballer, he had everything. You know, he could score goals. He was a central midfielder. He could score goals. He could attack. He could defend. He could tackle. He could head the ball. He was a brilliant leader. He'd you know, give you a right dig if you know, and you'd know about it if you went into a tackle with him. You know, playing against him, it was you know, it was actually a joy. You know, even though it was tough. You know, you'd go and whack him, and it was back when you could, you know, put a tackle in the 80s and 90s. Anyway, you could guarantee 5 minutes later he'd come and side you in two, but you'd have to get up again and get on with it. And then he'd go and score a goal. I say he could head it. He was strong, brave. You know, he was probably the best all-round player that I've certainly ever played against, and you know, seen. And then the other player, different type of player, was Eric Cantona. He was a magical player. Again, he was a big character in personality, but he was a big bloke, you know, 6'2", big, strong Frenchman, confident, arrogant, and he could, you know, he could play. You know, he could do things that you wouldn't believe. You think, well, how's he done that? I remember we played him at Main Road, played Man United at Main Road, and Alan Ball said, "Man mark Cantona." So I've gone to man mark him, and Cantona realised that was man marking him. So what he did, he went and stood on the Kip-Ax, which is the big home sort of side for Man City. Stood on the halfway line, and he just stood there. So I'm thinking, what do I do? I've been told to man mark him. So I literally stood there next to him, and the play was just going on. around. So because he was happy enough, he thought, well, okay, we'll play 10v10.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm not playing, he was confident in his team. You know, he had players like Giggs and Keane and Andy Cole and you know, all them boys playing. So he was happy for them to go, and Pallister and Bruce at the back and so he was, and Kanchelskis. So he said, right, well, okay, we'll play 10v10. You know, you just stand it, and I'm standing there and looking over to the bench, which is obviously like saying to Alan Ball, you know, what do we do type of thing. And he's like, he didn't know what to say. Went in at half time, and Alan Ball, I said, listen, Gaffer, I said, what do you want me to do? You've seen what's happening. He said, oh, just go and let him play. Just let him play. Because, you know, say he was an intelligent player and he just had that much influence. At Man United at that time, he was a huge influence. And I think we listened to the players that played with him, they all say the same thing. You know, not only was a brilliant footballer, he was a highly intelligent bloke. And that's why he stood on the halfway line. You know, he's entirely thought, well, okay, we'll play 10v10 then. And that then puts me out of the game as well. But he was happy to do that. And then second half, he just ran riot like he does anyway. Yeah. But yeah, Brian Robson, Eric Cantona, wonderful players. I say people like Gascoigne, on his day, you couldn't get near him. You know, you just couldn't. You just couldn't get near him because he was skillful. But you're going back into an era where the skillful players who were getting tackled hard, you know, and fouled as well. But he was able to ride those challenges and ride them. And if he got a kick or a dig, he'd get up, and he protected himself well. You know, look at Gascoigne when he's dribbling. He always had his arms up like that because he knew that players would be coming in and he'd be literally batting them off, and you couldn't get near him. But loads. Klinsmann, like when the internationals came out, the foreign internationals, Jurgen Klinsmann, German striker, Ruud Gullit at Chelsea. Yeah, so I was lucky to play against some world-class players, and yeah, it was a brilliant experience.
Not a shabby list, that isn't. Best player you've played with then?
I'll go two players again, different reasons. One, Peter Reid, England international, played, won everything at Everton under Howard Kendall's managership. Central midfielder, everything dead simple, everything. You know, he never passed. I never saw him pass the ball more than 20 yards, but he was wherever the ball was on the pitch. He was there. Don't ask me how he did it because I don't know. Wherever the ball was, he seemed to be around it, and he was always demanding the ball. And I was playing at right back at City at that time, and I'd get the ball, and before you knew it, there'd be him and Gary Megson. Everyone will remember Gary Megson, central midfielder, more known as probably a manager now. He managed Stoke, was one of his teams, but again, good central midfielder. They had him and Reid in the midfield, and they'd just demand the ball all the time. And he'd give it to him, he'd play it off, and then he'd just go and support. And he was, wherever the ball was, Reid seemed to be there, and he could tackle. He wasn't really a goal scorer, but a motivator on and off the pitch. He was, yeah, if not the best that I've played with. And as a right back, as a defender, he'd say, right, you hold up, say you're playing against the left winger, he said, you just hold him up, and then you'd hold him up. The next minute, Reid would come side in and, you know, and tackle him or get the ball off him. It was, it just made you feel confident and made you, you know, feel, yeah, I suppose confident, you know, to play with. And he'd be confident to give him the ball. He'd just give him the ball, and he'd like either knock it one or two touch, it's gone, and he'd move. And he was 34, 35 when he came to Man City. So he was at the back end of his career. But yeah, cracking player. And the other one, different player that I played with, was Georgie Kincladze. Yeah. The Georgian international. You see him do things with the ball that I've never seen anyone do. You know, anyone on a football pitch. More so in training because he'd be doing it every single day. He was a little bit. He didn't like the work side of it, but if you gave him the ball, he would do anything. He could, and he was all left-footed. So as a defender, and as a coach or player, first thing you do, left foot and put him onto his weaker foot, don't you? That's the first rule. Get him onto his weaker foot. So, I mean, he's in training. He'd always try and get him onto his right foot, and he couldn't do it because you'd get close to him and he'd do, a little movement. So he'd put you off, and then before you knew it, he'd got the ball back onto his left foot and he was away. And he was able to, he had the balance and skill to be able to shift you and shift the ball to where he wanted it. And he'd be gone with it. He's one of them that he never seemed to move more than 2-3 inches away from his foot when he ran. I mean, Alan Ball was or a training session. Georgie didn't like running. If you put a running session on, and running is a huge part of football. Especially in the modern game, but even back then it's a massive part because you've got to be able to fit, and that wasn't what Georgie liked. So we do a running session. If you say you were doing laps of a pitch, let's say laps of a pitch, he'd always cut the corner. He'd always be at the back. Anyway, Alan Ball realised he decided to do the running with the balls. So as soon as you give Georgie a ball and said, right, okay, run to the halfway line back and round the cone and come back, and give him a football, he'd be at the front. As long as he had a football at his feet, he wasn't bothered. If you took the football away from him, he would not run a tap, and it's so frustrating. But give him a ball, he could do it. Honestly, he could do anything with it. There's a goal, if people want to Google it up, Georgie Kincladze against Southampton.
I remember
It was at Main Road. He beat about 5 or 6 players. And they had Dave Besant was a goalkeeper. He had Dave Besant to beat, and he just scooped it over. He didn't pass it in or kick it in. It was sort of a little scoop. He scooped it up, and it just a brilliant piece of football. Brilliant.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh, what I think as a footballer, probably focused, dependable. And determined, as a footballer. Not bad. Probably that as a person as well. But yeah, focused, dependable, determined. I think for any other people, that's if you can try and be that. That's what I think. That's not necessarily what I am, but that's what I.
It might be not what Bobby thinks either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there anybody you would recommend or like to hear on the podcast?
I think, and I'd read your notes that you sent me before, and I think Paul Lake would be good. I can get you his contact.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he'd do it. Mm-hmm. He now works for the Premier League, Paul does. Okay. But I think just from a point of view of, we talked about it before, and he's experienced everything from the playing side and being, from being potentially England captain to having to retire through, so he's had a lot of bad experiences, but he's come through them and he's got through them. He trained up as a physio after he became a physiotherapist, and then he worked at Manchester City. They took him on as working for the community, and then he's now working for the Premier League. But I think he'd be very interesting from not only from a football point of view, but from how to deal with things that have gone wrong in your life, or things that, and being positive, when you're down there and out. So yeah, I think Paul Lake, and I'll speak to you after, and I'll speak to Lake, and then.
Yeah, but we'll speak off air if that could be arranged. That would be fantastic. Yeah. A lot of gems for us to take away from that. Ian, as I say, now we're bordering on 2.5 hours. It's been absolutely brilliant, and some of the insights into the game then and now, and your expertise, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and speaking to us. Wish you and Bobby well still. I'm sure we'll keep in touch. And, take care, my friend.
Yeah, and you. And thanks for having me on. And all the best with, your football coaching in your business. And like I said before, I know you're determined and I know you want to move down that path. And I think you've got the right credentials to, not only on the coaching side, but the right mentality to go and do that, because I know that you want it. So go for it, and we'll speak soon, mate.
Brilliant. I appreciate the kind words, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
No.
Cheers.
Hello, we're Tile Central UK, local tile stockist here on Trentham Trade Park, Stanley Matthews Way. Our opening hours are 8 till 5 in the week and Saturdays till 12.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the content that we're trying to bring to you. Don't forget, new episodes will be released every Monday. You can find us on the iTunes Store, Spotify, and if you want to see the video, you can see it on our YouTube channel, PCT Football Coaching.